Okay, so I think Memento is one of my favourite Christopher Nolan films, and it's arguably the movie that put him on the map. The film really carved out his signature style due to its non-chronological storytelling, and it's a movie that to this day can leave you still scratching your head. Throughout this video, we're going to be giving a big breakdown of what happens in it, the hidden details, and also the Easter eggs that make it one of the best movies the directors put out. Huge thank you for watching the video all the way through, and if you want something else to watch, then one of our breakdowns will be linked on screen right now. By the way, thanks for checking out the video. I've been Paul, I'll see you next time, take care. Well, it is Memento, so we have to go backwards, and this is shown from the opening shot of the film. Here we see Leonard's hand holding a Polaroid picture, which is fully developed. However, as he shakes it, it starts to blur and fade away because it's actually moving in reverse. This is very symbolic, as it's also how Leonard's memory works. Now in the movie we discover he has a condition, and this renders him unable to create short-term memories. So to him, the moment is crystal clear when it first happens, and then it starts to fade like the Polaroid we see here. Now this is the murder of Teddy, who we see throughout the movie is actually a policeman that's using Leonard for his own personal gain. Memento is very much a revenge story on a number of levels, and we see several characters that embody this ideology. Leonard believes that his wife was killed by a man called John G, and Teddy's weaponized this to make him his own personal assassin. Teddy has been framing people and then leaving breadcrumbs so that Leonard will track down this person and in the end murder them. These tend to be high-stake drug dealers, and thus Teddy makes off with the profits, whilst Leonard thinks that he's caught his wife's killer for roughly a couple of minutes. Now we discover in the film that Lenny killed a man called Jimmy G, and that the money Teddy's after is in the back of his car. Leonard takes his car with him, and on a second watch, it becomes clear that Teddy is constantly trying to get his hands on the keys.
My car.
This is your car.
Oh, you're in a playful mood.
There's no outcry.
Roll up your window.
Republican rhetoric about taxes.
It's broken.
I can get that fixed for you. A car this nice, you should lock.
It's not safe for you to hang around here anymore.
Why not?
Because the cops looking for you. Now I gotta get you a new identity, some new clothes, a different car would do for now.
Love how this stacks up a second time, with Teddy basically trying to manipulate Lenny into giving him the car at several points. He's not the only person who uses Leonard either, and in the movie we meet Natalie, who's played by Carrie-Anne Moss. We discover that Jimmy G was her boyfriend, and throughout the film she uses Lenny as her assassin to get the person who did it. It's basically revenge for what Cypher did to Switch in The Matrix.
Not like this. Not like this.
However, the end of the movie reveals that Lenny was always going to kill Teddy, and after learning the truth, he created his own game so that he would track him down. He's finally liberating himself of the life he's been forced into by making Teddy a target. We close out with him going to a tattoo store to start the entire game again, with Teddy as his next hit. This is called Emma's Tattoos, and it's actually named after Nolan's real-life wife. Now the tattoos are an important way for Leonard to know what to do and who to trust. However, he also has other methods. In the movie, he talks about how you learn to trust your own handwriting, and when Teddy pressures him into making a note about Natalie, he writes down "do not trust her." Later on, this is scribbled out so he can write about how she's also lost someone, and we can see the handwriting styles are different here as well. The first he wrote differently because it was Teddy telling him to do it, and therefore later on he knew not to trust what this said. Natalie too turns out to be a bad person, and Nolan stated that the scribble is also used to show how ineffective Lenny's photo system is. One thing can be put on it and then scribbled out, so yeah, it just causes more uncertainty. Now beyond his wife, there's very little that we learn about Lenny and his story in between her death and his quest for revenge. However, there was an in-canon website created by Nolan that gave us some extra tidbits. It's said that Leonard was put into a mental institution, and we know in the film that Sammy Jankis was in one too. Now Sammy was the man that Lenny projected himself onto in order to try and understand the condition that he'd developed. Sammy could very much be a real person, and Leonard talks about how he denied his insurance claim because he didn't believe in his condition. However, due to the similarities in their stories, it's also possible that Sammy and Lenny are one and the same, with the latter using him very much as a way to understand what's wrong with him. Sammy ended up in a mental asylum as well, and we do get a brief moment where he's sat in a chair. Pay close attention to this though, and we get a quick flicker of Lenny hinting at him actually being the one in the asylum. This is a detail I've missed so many times when watching it in the past, as it's on screen for a split second, but as the person passes, we can see the switch out. Now Leonard is often called Lenny.
Lenny!
It's Leonard. Like I told you before.
Did you? I must have forgot.
Sorry, I've been calling you Lenny a lot, and Lenny is of course similar sounding to Sammy. To add to this, when he flicks through the police files, we see a psychiatric paper, and we just have to look at the short story for more confirmation of this. Now the order of this was backwards, much like the film itself. Though the opening credits say that the movie is based on the short story by Jonathan Nolan, that actually released after the film did. Jonathan went to Christopher with the idea, and Chris said it would make a great movie, which is when they started to work on that. The movie released in 2000, and the story itself ended up dropping in 2001. Titled Memento Mori, this Latin phrase translates to remember that you have to die. The short story also has Leonard escaping from a mental asylum, and when you think about it, someone with this condition would need constant medical care. Now Teddy goes to pick Leonard up, and this is very much the other side of the story. Though Memento is often thought of being a film that moves backwards, there are two parts to it. We also have the black and white scenes which move forward, and they involve Leonard talking to Teddy on the phone. At the end of the movie, these two timelines join up, and this is shown by the black and white film changing into colour. In the opening, Leonard makes a joke about the Gideon Bible, and he ends up saying,
Nothing except the Gideon Bible, which I of course read religiously.
Now in the movie we get a shot of this being opened, and it's on Leviticus 24. This chapter talks about an eye for an eye, which very much sums up the idea for revenge that's pushing Leonard forward. It also says that if a man kills a man, then he must be killed himself, and because Lenny believes Teddy killed his wife, he must suffer the same fate. And the fact that Teddy is also a John G2 explains why he ends up giving this fake name. He doesn't want Leonard potentially turning his attention to him, and thus he lies to him from the start of the movie, or rather the end. Now lies are very important in the film, with the notes on Teddy's Polaroid saying don't believe his lies. Interestingly, Teddy's phone number's on the Polaroid too, and this number is actually also the same one that Marla has in Fight Club. In these scenes, you can also see that Leonard has scratches on his face, and throughout the movie, these get stronger and stronger. That's because time is moving backwards, and thus really great attention to detail by Nolan that just keeps up the whole chronology of the movie. Now Lenny meets the motel clerk Bert, who you'll probably recognise from starring in Nolan's movie Batman Begins. Later on, we also see a Batman symbol up in a shop window, showing how it's all connected. Now Leonard explains how the last thing that he remembers is his wife. He's constantly feeling like his wife was just killed, and he can't escape this. However, we learn that she actually survived this encounter, and that she became distraught with the fact that Leonard couldn't remember her. In the film, we learn about how Sammy's wife used to test him by doing things like hiding food to see if he'd find it when he's hungry. This was originally supposed to be in the movie, but Nolan decided to remove the scene and just keep the focus on Leonard. All the stuff with Sammy was originally meant to be bundled together, so we got all the black and white stuff in one go. However, Nolan decided that it worked better split throughout the movie so that the scenes could reflect the ones moving backwards. Now she too asked him to inject her with insulin, which he did several times, giving her a lethal dose. Lenny even creates tattoos for himself with a ballpoint pen, and it's possible that he's good at doing this because he was so used to using needles on his wife. Lenny talks about how happy his wife was, but in the flashbacks we see her, it seems like she's either crying or at least on the verge of tears. Now, I actually think that some of these memories are from after her head was struck, and these are flashes of her struggling to deal with the fact he can't remember her. He was the one who killed her, and thus a story's been manufactured in order to hide him from the guilt. Nolan stated that the movie is very much about the lies you tell yourself in order to give things meaning, and we definitely see this reflected in Lenny's actions at the end, or the start. Now, Leonard and his wife were attacked, and though he got the first person, the second assailant got away. The police didn't believe there was a second attacker, and thus he flew under the radar. However, Teddy was the one cop that believed him, and they tracked down the attacker and ended up killing him. However, from this point, Teddy saw an opportunity, and his greed eventually led to his downfall. At a diner, Leonard meets with Natalie, and we can see that she has a slightly bust up lip. This is something that Leonard actually gives her, and it's a way that Natalie gains the upper hand on him by using him to beat her so that she can weaponize his attack. She used him to get a man named Dodd who was after her, and she had herself beaten up so it seemed like Dodd did it. Now later on in the movie, Teddy explains how Natalie carries out drug deals, and this is done by passing coasters from the bar that she works at. Notes are written on the back of these and passed to customers, and with the money and supplies going missing, people have started looking for Jimmy and Natalie. Natalie could blame Leonard for her boyfriend's death, but instead she sees something in common with the character. They're both survivors that lost the ones they loved, and they're now trying to get even with the person who took everything away from them. In the black and white flashbacks that follow, we learn that Leonard worked in insurance, and the skills he got here have helped his life massively. He learned to read body language, namely when someone was lying, but here we see that isn't really the case. In fact, every character that Lenny interacts with is lying to him, and he's pretty much surrounded by sharks and sinking very quickly. Now from here, we jump to a scene with Teddy. Clearly aware that Natalie's trying to get him, he even suggests that Lenny could be after the wrong guy.
Very careful.
Why?
The other day you mentioned that maybe somebody was trying to set you up, get you to kill the wrong guy.
Oh, well, I go on facts, not recommendations, but thank you.
And speaking of liars, at the discount inn, we find that Bert's actually renting him out 2 rooms. He's paying twice as much because he's taking advantage of him, and it shows how everyone around Lenny is using him in some way. Now from here we catch Lenny's investigation into Sammy Jenkins. He starts to believe he's not telling the truth because Sammy gives him almost a look of recognition whenever he shows up at the house. However, we learn that this is something Sammy carried out because he didn't want to make people feel uncomfortable. He wanted to pretend that he remembered them so that they wouldn't feel bad, making it even more tragic. Sammy was given several tests as it was thought he would instinctively avoid electrocuting himself. However, this didn't happen and thus his claim was denied. His wife was stuck with the medical bills and it ruined both of them, or her and Lenny, I don't know. Anyway, Sammy is tested by a doctor who Nolan also cast in The Dark Knight Rises in a doctor role. Thomas Lennon plays both these parts and he said that he at least likes to think that they're the same person. Now after Dot is revealed in Leonard's cupboard, Teddy shows up and the pair drive out. We get a focus on Teddy's license plate which ends in 71U. However, this later changes to 7RU, perhaps adding how much of an unreliable narrator that Lenny is and how it's all potentially in his head. Mental Asylum, Theory Time again. Also, we are selling Theory Time clothing right now on our merch store 0 edition, so if you want to support the channel and get something back, then make sure you check that out in the comments section below. Now this idea of him having unreliable memories is also shown in the photo that Natalie ends up giving to him. In one we can see Jamie has a mustache, whereas in the other one he doesn't. Natalie too is posed differently, and this again adds to the idea of him misremembering things or seeing them different to how they actually are. They also have some fun with the props too, as Teddy's license plate expires on the 29th of February. This isn't a real date due to it not being a leap year, and thus they're kind of playing around and messing with the audience a bit. Anyway, we see a scene at night in which Lenny drives out to burn his wife's belongings. This includes a book that she had which she read so many times that the cover's fallen off and the pages have started to curl. Lenny even asks her why she keeps reading it again, and she says,
How can you read that again?
It's good.
Yeah, but you've read it like 1,000 times.
I enjoy it.
Now this is very much a reflection of Lenny's life, with him being stuck in the same story, going through it over and over and over again. He also burns a clock, which no prizes for guessing what the symbolism with that is. Now after another black and white scene, we watch Lenny waking up with the belongings that he's about to go and burn. Here we can see them set up around the room, and this is exactly like how he had them in his old house. Now he does this because it gives him the feeling for a few moments that his wife's still alive. Now it turns out that he's hired an escort, and this is so he can relive the time when he believed he was happy. Now Nolan did go back and forth over whether to keep this scene in the movie or not, but he settled on it staying because it shows Lenny's willing to manipulate himself, which plays into the ending. In a flashback, we see Leonard being visited by Sammy's wife, who asks him flat out whether he's faking his condition. Leonard denies it, and it leads to her apparent death. It's very much karma, with the same thing possibly happening to Leonard and his wife, but I think the chances of 2 people being affected by this condition are extremely rare. Obviously, let me know below if you think Sammy was a real person or not, or if it's just a projection so Leonard can save himself from the guilt. Now Leonard then goes to his car and he finds Teddy inside because he left it unlocked. Teddy has been waiting there, but he can't drive off with it because he doesn't have the keys and doesn't want to move the money himself. At the end of the film, Lenny throws his car keys away, and I don't think that he ever finds them, which could be another reason why he's constantly trying to get the car. Lenny stayed at Natalie's, but Teddy's the one who suggests the motel because it takes him away from her. We see all the stuff with Natalie and her true side and how she actually speaks to Leonard. She tells him that she's going to use him and that she's going to enjoy it, and unloads on him like it's the YouTube comments section and you've got one thing wrong in your 4,000 word video script. It's so sinister how Natalie sits in the car staring at him as she waits for him to forget, and we've of course seen the scene before how she plays this whole thing out. Now we then see her bringing him over to her house in the next scene and she moves a newspaper off some food. This is a real estate guide, and obviously Natalie lives a very dangerous life, so it's possible that she and her boyfriend would constantly be looking at other places. There's also a rotten apple as well, and calling someone a rotten apple, of course, means they're a bad person. Natalie is probably the wickedest character that we meet, and I love the way that Nolan uses this to symbolize it. We get a split-second shot where he flicks a syringe, and this is also something that we saw Sammy doing with his wife. Again, this ties the characters together, and since they both do it in a similar way, it could be hinting at them being one and the same. Cut back to the motel, and we see Lenny refusing to take calls due to a tattoo warning him against it. At this point, an envelope's passed under the door, and it shows a photo of him pointing to his heart. Now this is very, very important, and it shows the extent that Teddy's manipulated him. We discover that Lenny was pointing to his heart because he was gonna get a tattoo there to show that he got his wife's killer. This means that every time he looked at it, he'd know he managed to catch them and get his revenge. Leonard'S Polaroids are very much his memories, and they're what he uses to keep things in order. Now Teddy snapped this photograph because it would be used as a way for Lenny to remember to go and get the tattoo there so he could finally be free from his quest for revenge. However, the fact that Teddy passed this under the door shows that he took this from him. Teddy stole the memory of this because he didn't want Leonard to move on, and in fact he wanted to keep using him. He gives him the photo back here as a way to manipulate him and will constantly use it to get Leonard to open up. Lenny goes to the bar because a coaster tells him about Natalie. However, as we learn, he's actually wearing her boyfriend's clothes and this coaster was a message for him. Now here she gets everyone to spit in Lenny's drink to test if he actually has memory issues or not. Like Sammy, he doesn't remember it, but she does take it off him in the former scene after hearing about his wife's murder. We then cut to the tattoo shop where Teddy tries to warn Lenny by telling him about himself.
Because the cop's looking for you.
Whoa, what cop?
He's a bad cop. He's the one that checked you into the discount head. He's been calling you for days now, telling you shit, slipping envelopes under your door, shit like that. Knows you're no good on the phone, so he's been calling you up. Sometimes you don't answer the phone, so he slips shit under your door to scare you into answering the phone again. Giving you a line of crap about John G being some local drug dealer.
In his pocket he finds a coaster and also sees the burned photograph, which we know was him pointing at his heart. We see the scene with Jimmy playing out and discover that he has 200 grand stuffed in the back of his car. He kills him and steals his clothes, which is when Teddy arrives. At this point, Teddy reveals the truth after Leonard realizes that Jimmy wasn't the killer. This is a gut-wrenching scene in which he says Sammy never had a wife and that it's Lenny's wife who was actually diabetic. Lenny believes he wasn't, and it's a complete head for the audience. Now the director's commentary goes in depth on this, with Nolan going through what this scene means. He stated at this point Lenny very much becomes the audience, and just like him, we aren't prepared for the truth. We also don't fully accept the answers, even after Teddy shows him the photograph. Lenny still doesn't really believe it, and he burns all of this evidence. Nolan stated that they deliberately chose Polaroids because they couldn't be ripped up like a card photograph could. Thus, they have to be burned, and Lenny is symbolically burning through the thing that's given him a purpose so he can continue to have a purpose. He writes down Teddy's license plate and draws the eye as a straight line, which again could be interpreted as an eye or a 1. He then drives off and he looks at his hand to focus on the Sammy Jenkins tattoo. He does this because it reinforces the idea that he has to stick to the path and the story that he's on. Now to add even more of a head to it, Nolan actually recorded 4 different endings for the commentary, with each one lasting roughly 20 minutes for the final part of the film. These are selected randomly every time you put the disc in, and depending on what one you get, it could drastically change major parts of the film. The first one has him saying Teddy is lying, whilst the second one says that he's telling the truth. The third basically says this is all a monotonous thing for Teddy, and it also adds that his license plate is SG137IU, which is the postcode for Nolan's old school. The last one has the final 20 minutes playing in reverse, so you can't really understand it. So yeah, who knows if we'll ever know the truth, and Nolan is deliberately keeping this ambiguous for us to take our own interpretations. I think that's the perfect point to turn things over to you and also ask you to let me know what you think's going on with the movie. Memento is a classic, and to me, it always has been. This is one of Nolan's strongest films, and going back to it just reminded me of how good this movie is. The reveals are crushing, the characters are so complex, and it's very, very tragic. The movie is such a great study of the human condition, and it's packed with a lot of things in it that I hope this video helps you to appreciate. A huge thank you for checking this out, and please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe on your way out. If you want something else to watch, we have a big breakdown of Interstellar, which will be linked on screen right now. Out of the way, I've been Paul, I hope to see you on the next one. You take care of yourself, and all the best for the new year. Peace.